All right, so I'll just kind of go. Basically, my point though is if my mom and dad would just talk to me, if they could just see me and stuff, I think it would have solved a lot of problems. None of this crazy stuff would have happened. The chaos wouldn't have happened. So, just like some more examples. So, I tried to talk to my mom. Basically, my mom would barely ever talk to me. She mostly would have me blocked on her phone, and every once in a while would return or she would answer her phone if I was calling her. So I called her, and then, like I said, I wanted to talk to my dad. I had a hurt leg. And my mom would say, like, you can't force someone to talk to you if they don't want to talk to you. You can't force someone to see you if you don't want to see you. This is like 2014. And again, this is stemming from the shoot away days because I needed help with my shot. And, my dad would help me, but then there would be a conflict. And I know I can go into details, but it's sad because I don't want to make good shooters think, so I'm not going to. Maybe one day, but I don't think I will. But I can go into details about all types of stuff with basketball, but especially this, how it messed up my shot. And I could show exactly what happened and the shoot away machine, how I was messing it up. But, at the time I needed help. So, I tried to force my dad to help me, but my dad helped me my whole life. He was always helping me with basketball. The only thing that happened was the shoot away machine made it so even if he was helping me, it was still going to be a problem. So it was just a tragic situation. It was all because of the shoot away machine. Now, because I tried to force him, my grandpa came in and my grandpa was like, well, yes, it's med psychiatry. You can't force things. You have to just, be in the flow and, you can't make things happen. You gotta, make things, you can make things possible, but you can't make things happen. You can't force things. And so my mom, memorized this stuff. And mom was like, yeah, Ryan, you can't force things. You can't force your dad to talk to you. You can't force things. So, and again, it just stems from the contempt that she developed for me during that time period. Now, I tried to ask my mom, like, can I talk to dad? She's saying this. And then she would say, Ryan, so many kids have dads that won't talk to them. It's so many people have dads that won't talk to them. Why are you such a baby? Why do you need to talk to your daddy? Your dad is never going to talk to you again in your life. You have to get that through your head. You got to get that straight. It's never going to happen. So just get that through your head. And then she'd hang up. Now, other things that she told me, like one time I called her and then she said that she told me that she had been going to NAMI meetings, like the North American Mental Illness thing or whatever, like for parents with children with mental illnesses. And I told her, I don't have a mental illness. Why would you be going to NAMI meetings? She's like, yes, you do have a mental illness. You have schizophrenia. You tricked the doctor. The doctors, didn't know. And, you should go back to a psychiatrist and you should tell him about the quadrant model. And then they will know that you have a mental illness and stuff. So, but the thing is, as I said, the doctor said you can't trick a doctor. If I had a mental illness, I wouldn't be able to trick them. So I don't have a mental illness. Then, like another thing that she told me one time around this time when she told me that she had talked to her psychiatrist, she was seeing a psychiatrist and she said that her psychiatrist told her that she thinks that it would be best if she doesn't talk to me anymore. So she said, I'm going to block you on my phone, but you can, if there's ever anything that you really need, you can text me and I will, respond to your text if you ever really need something, but I'm going to block you on my phone and we're not going to talk to each other anymore. So this was like 2014, right? So, I'm going through this and then I had a hurt leg. So I needed help from my dad. My dad's a doctor. So, but he wouldn't talk to me and he wouldn't see me. So, as I described, I went to, at one point I went to my grandma's house in Los Angeles and I wanted to get help from her. Now, at one point, this was about the time when I moved again from being a right winger to a left winger. I described how my grandpa had stopped studying with me because we got in an argument because I told him how I thought that it was mainly his fault because he was the one who kind of imposed all these ideas like no talking about the past and make Ryan independent and, don't force things and, all the things that my mom and dad would parrot. And I basically felt that he was the one who set up these conditions that were terrible for me. So I told him that, and then he got mad at me, and he said he didn't want to teach me anymore. So he wasn't going to teach me anymore. So now I'm even more upset because, keep in mind, at this time, I didn't understand metapsychiatry. I didn't understand it like I do now. So I was just confused, and I just thought that he might have been a white supremacist, and I didn't understand what was going on, and I was just confused, and now he wasn't even teaching me. So now I was confused, and he wasn't teaching me. So he basically just left me out in the dark. So, but then I went back to my grandma's house in Los Angeles for a little bit and out of my place in Escondido. And while I was at my grandma's house, I remember this is when I kind of changed from being right winger to left winger. Oh, and another thing was I was very into Islam at the time, and it's kind of like Andrew Tate. Like I liked Islam a lot because I thought that Islam would be good for the white race because I was like, it's against female promiscuity, it's against like, it basically, it's strict judicially, and it would be good for the white race. But I didn't like the race missing aspect of Islam, but I thought that Islam would be good. Either Islam or Christianity. Like I just liked religion. Remember when I was a communist leftist, I hated religion. I wanted everybody to mix. I liked Islam the best, but even Islam I didn't like because I thought that religion was just basically white supremacist. But now that I became more pro-white, I liked religion. So, I was a fan of Islam. And I didn't like Christianity, kind of like Andrew Tate, because Andrew Tate was like, because people misuse Christianity and they say like, oh, Jesus said to love everybody, and that means that I should have free love and I should do whatever I want. And I was like, no, dude, that's not good. That's basically bad for the white race, and it's just a leftist, communist women, and it's just basically terrible. So but I was a fan of strict right wing Orthodox religion, and I really liked Orthodox Judaism too. So I would go to Orthodox Jewish meetings and stuff, and I was studying with the rabbi and everything, and I liked Islam, I liked Judaism. I became a fan of religion. Remember, at first when I was a communist leftist, I hated religion. Then like 2015, in 2015 when I became like a right winger and conservative, I started to really like religion, especially religion that wasn't like leftist type of religion. But I thought that was just a fake type of religion. But then I remember about this time was when I started becoming a left winger again, because I remember I went to my grandma's house in Granada Hills, and I wanted to get back into rap music. But like I said, I could only write raps when I'm playing serious basketball. And I wanted to get back in serious basketball, but I had a hurt leg. But I remember I was on my friend Teddy, who's his dad. He said that he was like a quarter white, but he was Filipino, but he was a quarter white. And so I was writing a rap on his timeline, and then I wrote some cuss words in the rap, and then he texted me like, dude, why would you write that on my timeline? Because he's a big time Christian. And he was like, and I always saw him as kind of a white supremacist. He was a Filipino guy, and a lot of Filipino guys I always saw as white supremacists, but he was like, he saw himself as quarter white, so he really liked white people. But he was like, dude, why would you write, cuss words on my timeline? He was like, dude, he said, no wonder why Jews are a dying race, a dying breed. And then I remember I got really upset. And I remember, you see, again, like I went back into race mixing mode. I went back into leftist mode. So because I blamed it on his like quarter whiteness that he was like that, right? And I became against conservatives again. So I remember at this time, my grandpa, I think he started teaching me again, because I started writing online about how, about everything that had happened, about how he had tried to force me to be independent, and how I thought he was a Nazi because he had said about the Jews being parasites in Germany and stuff. And I basically tried to make him feel bad, and then so that he would study with me again. So he started studying with me again. And I went back to Malibu to start studying with him. And I remember he kind of was also he was sort of making me more left-wing as well, because he was teaching me like that there was, that God, he didn't believe the quadrant model. That was one thing. But he was teaching me like, God is energy, and, and you don't want to believe anything, because if you believe, then you're attached to your beliefs. And at the time he didn't explain it well, but now I understand. If you're in the flow, then you're open to inspiration and stuff. But he never taught me this well. But it seemed more leftist what he was teaching me, right? And then also he started, I liked Islam a lot at that time. And I was telling my grandpa how I liked Islam, but my grandpa was like, and I was like, because I think it's good that they punish women for adultery. And I think it's good that they don't allow women to like, to go to, I think it's good that they have the women in the kitchen and stuff like that, because, it's good for the white race and stuff. That's the way that I saw it. But I thought it was beneficial to, stop promiscuity and stop, degeneracy, right? And how they're against drugs and stuff. I thought that, alcohol and drugs and stuff was bad for the white race. And because I become pro-white at this time. But then my grandpa was telling me like, no, that's just one interpretation of Islam. And he was like, and he started telling me that there's liberal Muslims who say that, no, Islam doesn't teach that you can't drink alcohol. And no, Islam doesn't teach that women need to cover their heads and all this stuff. And so then I started looking it up, and I started seeing these liberal interpretations of the Bible, of the Quran and of the Bible, like saying like, Muhammad, blessing peace be upon him, just taught that stuff at that time because he was, he was trying to move the Muslims away from actually being extremely conservative to a little bit half conservative. So the reason why I told women that they have to cover their hair when they're giving testimony, and only 2 women at the time, was because he was moving them away from when women weren't allowed at all to give testimony. And he said that 2 women now can give testimony, but he was moving them eventually to where they would be allowed to give testimony on their own. And, when I was a right winger, I was like, women are liars, and, it's good that women, I had the right wing orientation of kind of like looking down upon women and more looking down upon minorities and stuff, and they're more violent and stuff. But when I was a left winger, remember, I was like, no, it's all the white man's fault, and they're not more violent. It's just, the system, and it's just environment. Like my friend Noah was he had a pit bull, and he's very into the idea. It's environment. And if you just treat a pit bull good, it's gonna, the pit bull is not gonna be violent. It's about the environment more. It's not about biology. It's not, that's kind of the more leftist way of looking at things. And black people would be fine if it just wasn't for the white man and, the bad environments and stuff that the white man imposes. And so that's the way that I was when I was a leftist. But when I was a right winger, I was more, I looked more down upon women and minorities and stuff. And, because I was against race mixing, and I thought there was a race mixing agenda. But then my grandpa's telling me like, no, he's giving me these liberal ideas. And also it seemed to me liberal, like the idea that God is energy. And, so I was like, okay, well, maybe my grandpa is liberal. And then I remember like my friend, my friend Teddy, he was like, no wonder Jews are a dying breed. And remember, I thought that also being a right winger would be better for the Jews. But then I'm like, no, actually the conservatives are the ones who are against the Jews. So again, like I think at the very core, I was really for the Jews. And the reason why I wanted the race mix the white people was because I thought it would be best for the Jews. And, and I also saw Jews as more people of color and stuff. And, Teddy, I remember he was kind of like racist against black people and kind of racist against Jews and stuff, right? So, I wanted to defeat the white people and mix them and stuff. And because I thought that was best for Jews. But then so after Teddy said that, I remember I kind of moved again more toward the left wing. So, and I remember that's when I was talking to my friend Noah on the phone, and my friend Noah was saying that he thought that, because I told him about how when I got that shot, it gave me retrograde ejaculation. He said, well, maybe the psychiatrists are trying to perform eugenics on mentally ill people. And again, like, leftists are all about the victim, right? The victims are the good guys and the people with power are the bad guys. So, the psychiatrists are the bad guys and the mentally ill people are actually the good guys, and they're just being victimized. And, so that's the way I kind of moved again. And, and I think another reason why I kind of moved more to leftism was because, again, my grandpa, my family's like, my mom's like, I felt like they were white supremacists. Like, you're trying to, you can't force people to like you or see you and stuff. Like, they're trying to blame the victim. Like, they're making me the bad guy. Like, I'm the bad guy. But the thing was, I'm like, no, I'm not the bad guy. You guys are just being right winger, mean people. Like, you have no compassion. You guys are just like, so, but it turns out, my grandpa says, yes, my mom was expressing predator-prey software. And, my mom did kind of seem like a right winger. Like, my mom would be like, don't give to the homeless, they should get a job and stuff like that. And she thought that she was doing what my grandpa taught, but my grandpa would be like, no, she just expresses predator-prey software. She's very immature. My grandpa didn't like my mom. My grandma didn't like my mom, but my mom thought that my grandpa liked her. Like I said, when my mom was at the psych ward, she was like, I just want Ryan to be independent. I want him out of my life. And she thought that that's what my grandpa was all about. But the people at the psych ward were like, dude, did you ever like support Ryan with the quadrant model? Did you ever support him? Like, the way you're talking to him is like really cruel. And of course he's going to be upset. You're being very mean. Like, a mother should not talk to her son like that. My mom's like, what? I thought that this was what all psychiatrists were about. His grandpa's all about independence. So she just doesn't get it. She just doesn't have it all. She's not that intelligent, So, but anyways, I moved from being right winger to being left winger again. And this was about 2015, right? And so then I started, Noah was like, yeah, I think that, psychiatry is just a form of eugenics against mentally ill people, especially schizophrenics, and the medicines are actually designed to give them retrograde ejaculation to make it so they can't reproduce and stuff like that. So I was like, that's interesting. So then I wrote my book, Psychiatric Slavery. And it was like a left-wing manifesto. And in it, I'm describing like, my thesis was that the reason my mom and dad thought I was mentally ill was because they abused me. And they want to tell themselves, oh, well, what we did to him was just. because they abused me because of the shoot away machine, but they want to say what we did was just, it wasn't our fault. It's because he was mentally ill. And then, so they don't have the cognitive dissonance of believing, oh, so we hurt innocent person. You know, they want to believe that what they did was okay. So I was like, and I tried to argue the same thing with black people. I was like, yes, well, and the same thing with black people, you know, the white people, race is a social construction, of course, and white people made up the notion of black so that they could have, so they can make money. And then they abused the black people. And now they maintain this idea that black people are inferior and that there is such thing as black people. And that, you know, and because then it maintains a status quo, number one. And number two, because of all the abuse that was done to them, the only way that white people cannot go crazy is if they tell themselves, well, black people deserved it. And I was like, and then there's also the, what is that effect called when somebody is abused? Stockholm syndrome. The black people have Stockholm syndrome. So then they, you know, they maintain their stereotypes and they actually like their oppressors and you know, the status quo is maintained, and black people do act crazy and they do act criminal, but that's because of the abuse that occurred. And I'm thinking to myself, like the victim too, like the reason why I'm acting crazy is because I was abused, and because, you know, I'm being mistreated and I'm being neglected and I'm being dismissed, and then that makes you go crazy. And the same thing has happened with black people. They were abused and dismissed and seen as less than human and crazy, and now they're acting crazy. And then the people who abuse them, the white people, they justify it by saying, hey, you know, they deserved it. Look at them now. They're still crazy. You know, no wonder why we enslaved them. They're evil people. And I was like, yeah, the same thing's happening with me, with my mom and dad. You know, yeah, now I'm acting crazy, and, you know, now I became a right winger or acted, you know, bad and stuff. But, you know, it's really just the product of the abuse and the mistreatment that I'm facing and the being dismissed and the being neglected. And you know, so again, I went back to being a leftist, and I went back to being a race mixer. Like I wanted race mixing again. And I thought, and I started thinking like that might be what's best for the Jews, right? Again. So I went, my whole life I was a leftist, and I became a right winger for a little bit in like 2014, and I went back to being a leftist and being for race mixing and stuff. And it was kind of like very anti-white manifesto, my psychiatric slavery book. And I was saying the same thing with mentally ill people. I was like, with most mentally ill people, they were abused. And then because they were abused, the people who abused them want to, you know, they continue to dismiss them and treat them poorly. And then, you know, they're the identified patients. And then the psych ward system continues the abuse and justifies the abuse by saying that they're mentally ill, but they're not mentally ill. They're just reacting to their abuse. So it's like, I had like a victimology mindset, right? Like it's, you know, the victims are the good guys and really it was directed toward the white people. Like the white people are the ones who are at the top, the white man, right? And I wanted race mixing, right? So put down the white man, put down the people at the top. And it's always, the victims are always good. And in the book, I also talked about witches, right? How, you know, the religious people said that the women were witches, but really it was just a way to make money off of the women and, you know, to try to, you know, maintain control over the women, you know, for maybe Darwinian motivations to keep the women, you know, and I went back to believing in Darwinism, right? Because I was against religion, you know, when I was a leftist. So it's in order to keep the women from, you know, from doing what they want to do, and you know, and then they call them witches, and then they kill them in order, you know, but really they weren't witches. And the women, you know, there's also suggestibility where the women would be told that they are witches, and because the women want to maintain the status quo, it's a human proclivity to want to maintain the status quo. They would act in accordance with the labels that were put on them as witches. So they would act like witches because of suggestibility by the priest, kind of like that in psychiatry, there's suggestibility by the doctors who tell the people that they're mentally ill, and then they act mentally ill, and even the medicine makes them act even more mentally ill, and then the women acted more mentally ill, and it maintained the status quo. And, you know, basically it's just victimology. Like it's all the people at the top's fault. It's all the white man's fault, you know, and the victim's always the good guy. And that was what I wanted to believe. I became a leftist again. And I looked at myself in that situation like, yes, you know, they say my parents want to believe I'm schizophrenic, so then I acted crazy. But it was the suggestibility, it was the mistreatment. It was just a reaction to mistreatment. Now it is true, even the doctors said that I never had a mental illness, and they said that I had family problems. But, you know, the thesis that I was arguing in this in this book, Psychiatric Slavery, was basically like everything's a social construction. Gender is a social construction. Race is a social construction. Mental illness is a social construction. And, basically it was a victimology thing. And my idea was that, everything's a continuum. Race is a continuum. Gender is a continuum. And, the belief that it's not a continuum is the desire to maintain the status quo and to maintain control and for the group in power, who's the white man, basically. And it was a very anti-white manifesto. So like even in the book, I was like, white people are actually the ones who are Neanderthals, but they called the black people less than human. But actually white people are mixed with Neanderthals. Well, it turns out also black people are mixed with Homo erectus. But, I wanted to lean everything to be anti-white because I was a leftist again, and I was for race mixing again. So like it was a left-wing race mixing anti-white manifesto that I wrote. Everything's a social construction. Gender's a social construction. Race, and I basically, so I went back to being a left winger. This is 2015. So I'm going to get more into this in a minute.